Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Restaurant on 20. I'm Chef Jeff, and I'm doing a mushroom vol au vent. Classic French dish using some wonderful mushrooms that are in prime season right now. Vol au vent literally means to steal the wind, and it literally refers to a pastry of usually puff pastry, but you could use potato, you could use whatever your heart may desire, that is sort of made into a cup, and then you have the free will of stuffing anything inside of it. It could be a seafood-based item. In this case, we're using mushrooms. We have wonderful chanterelle mushrooms and maitake mushrooms, also known as hen of the wood. These are local, that we foraged in the beautiful forests of Connecticut. So the chanterelles, what we do, you see here, these are some raw chanterelles, and they're super dirty, and they've got grit and pine needles all over them. So what you have to do, what's really important, is wash them thoroughly. So these are a washed version of the chanterelles, and what we do is we go through each mushroom with a little paring knife, pick out any of the debris that's on there, and then they get a bath and warm water about 3 times. We change the water about 3 times. They sit in that warm water, and what that does is sort of lets some of the debris and everything settle down to the bottom, and then we scoop out the mushrooms, and they get cleaned about three different times, and they're good to go. So what's important now is that we're going to cook these mushrooms in a fashion that allows us to bring out the most flavor, both with the chanterelles and the hen of the woods. The hen of the woods, again, are a little cleaner. They haven't seen a bath. What we've done is essentially just clean them thoroughly with a small paring knife. And what I'm going to do now is really just sort of get them ready to cook. And these are some of my favorite mushrooms, super aromatic. They've got an incredible nutty flavor. If you're not finding these out in the woods, which you probably aren't, they're available at most supermarkets now. And like today, you can buy anything online. So I have a little bit of maitake mushrooms, a little bit of chanterelle mushrooms. I like the smaller ones. They present a little better. So here's what I'm going to use really for my dish today. So we have mushrooms and we have our pastry, right? And today we're using just puff pastry. Store-bought, in the freezer aisle, puff pastry. We here at the restaurant, we like a certain type of puff pastry that's all butter. And that's available at most supermarkets. You'll find that like Pepperidge Farm, they tend to, and other companies, they tend to put a lot of just weird stuff in there. We just like butter, okay? So this is an all butter puff pastry sheet. And it's important when you're working with puff pastry that you keep it cold, and that if you are going to roll anything out, that you have some flour so it doesn't stick to your surface. I'm not doing any rolling today. Essentially what I'm going to do is cut our little pastry mold, which is super easy if you have the right utensils. I have these circle cutters, these molds, and you could use the outline of a coffee mug or something at home. But what you really need to do to create this vol au vent is make 2 cuts, right? And this is going to be our top layer, like that, and then our lower layer. All right, put those together like so on a sheet tray. I'm going to start with the bottom base here, right, and then this is our ring that goes on top. So we're going to take this little insert out, and then this ring is what we put essentially right on top. Right. Before I do that, I have a little egg wash here. I'm just going to put a little egg wash actually on the pastry. Okay, and then another little egg wash on top. All right. Now, again, very important. What this is going to do is it's going to go into the oven at 300 degrees, preferably a convection oven if you have. But it's important to let this chill after you cut it. So what I'm going to do is throw it in the freezer, get it nice and cold. And with puff pastry, when you go from ice cold to warm to nice and hot, you get an incredible expansion. The steam inside of the pastry is what helps it rise, and you get an incredible, nice and fluffy product. So that's something very important to keep in mind of in any puff pastry preparation you do before you bake. Throw it in the freezer or the refrigerator, let it chill, let it set, and you're good to go. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm working on pastry. It's going to come out of the oven now. minutes out of the oven, I can start cooking my mushrooms. All right, so I have a hot pan. All right, I'm gonna add a little olive oil to that. I'm gonna add my mushrooms directly to that pan. All right, both the chanterelles and the maitakes. I'm gonna go on high heat, super high heat. You wanna get a sear on these mushrooms. And I'm not gonna add any salt right away. I'm gonna add it later. I am gonna add pepper. Fresh cracked pepper is a mushroom's best friend. So we're gonna use the pepper. Pretty liberal with that. I'm gonna let those mushrooms continue to cook, get a little caramelization, develop a nice flavor, and we can take a look at our nice pastry molds here coming right out of the oven. So what I've done here, folks, is I just created a little layer with a rack on top so that when these pastry rise, they meet the layer at the top and they don't expand anymore. And this creates a nice sort of even, neat-looking pastry mold. So those are our 3 pastry molds. We get to, at this point, take our finger and sort of just push down in the middle, right? And now we've got an amazing little beautiful pocket to put anything in. Now we're using mushrooms, but I said you could use, you know, like if you wanted to do like a miniature version of chicken pot pie, you could make your chicken pot pie filling and then put it in there. Or you can make like a seafood-based filling, put it in there. All right, so we're getting a nice saute on our mushrooms here, right? Nice good heat. Let that cook down just a little bit more. The magic of a restaurant kitchen is that we have a lot of beautiful things laying around that we can use. For this instance, I'm using a mushroom cream sauce to help garnish the plate. So what this is all the trim from the mushrooms. When we clean them, all the trim, we create a stock with. All right. So when we clean all these mushrooms, we create a lot of trim that we don't use. That goes into a pot with water, a little bit of garlic, a little bit of soy sauce, and it cooks down just like any stock. And what you get is essentially a nice infused mushroom stock. So we use that stock to create a sauce that's based on a little bit of port wine and stock and some cream brought down. All right, so I've got a nice thing going on here with my mushrooms. At this point, I'm going to salt, and I'm going to add some fresh minced shallots. Shallots are also a mushroom's best friend. Introduce them back to the heat. Touch of butter. Now I've got my wonderful mushroom sauce, nice and hot. And let's go to the plate now. All right, so we're gonna go ahead, take a touch of the sauce down on the plate, just to hold our mushroom there. Now our beautiful roasted mushrooms are ready. We're going to finish them with a little bit of chive. And again, what's really important here is to taste our food before we serve. Check for seasoning. I'm going to add a little more pepper. And actually, what you can do is add a touch of acid to this. I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of lemon juice on top. Okay, now it's time for the plate. Right into the pastry. And it's perfectly okay to go above and beyond the layer here. It doesn't have to be all contained in there. It can sort of be overflowing. That's what we like. A little sort of a nice bountiful presentation here. Okay, and now the garnish, a little bit of the sauce. The sauce I'm gonna, what's the French call nap, I'm gonna just pour right on top of my dish here. A little bit on the plate. Little garnish of micro thyme. Et voilà, bon appétit. Mushroom vol au vent.